We're so excited to have this special collaboration with NASA Johnson Space Center, and we're honored to present this historic event. I'm also very excited to introduce the moderator for our program. She's also the first African-American woman to be the director of NASA Johnson Space Center, Vanessa White.
I'm happy to be here with you all at Space Center Houston. Today, we're going to hear from former and current astronauts who will share with you their own journeys to space. Robert Herbing, Jeanette Epps, Bernard Harris, Leland Melvin, Stephanie Wilson, Victor Glover, I'm going to start with a question, and I'm going to throw it out and would like for everyone to have an opportunity to give a response. Describe to us a picture of who you thought you would be as a student or young child. What were you studying, and what type of person did you think you could be? We'll start with Stephanie.
Well, when I was in middle school, I was very fortunate that my parents were very supportive and education was very important to them. And I was given a school assignment in a career awareness class to interview somebody that worked in an interesting career field, and I was interested in astronomy at the time. And after talking to a local area astronomy professor, I was fascinated by his work. I thought that that would be an excellent way to contribute to being a STEM professional.
When I was a really young kid, probably sixth grade, my mother gave me this age-appropriate non-ocean certified chemistry set. And I mixed these two dissimilar chemicals and created the most incredible explosion in my mother's living room. I burned a hole in her carpet. And my mother she was small, but she had the power to knock me off the... But it was that moment that I realized that I could be a chemist because I'd already done it. All I needed was a lab coat and goggles. So chemistry was something I learned at an early age, and I love sports, but I never saw myself going into the NFL because I don't know, for whatever reason, but I did see myself as a scientist. So STEM was always something that was very critical to me.
It's funny, I think it all starts with chemistry because my mother was a chemistry teacher. And as I got older, the chemistry set kept getting bigger and bigger. I didn't burn a hole in her carpet, thank God, because I might not be here if that happened. But that was always interesting to me. And I grew up in Baltimore during a time when Apollo was big, so I just kept seeing these larger and larger rockets being designed. And design always interested me, and I always thought I was going to be a design engineer. That's what I was going to be.
So as a kid, I didn't really know who I thought I would be when I grew up. I just kind of, did my thing and, did my work. And one day, when I was about 9 years old, my twin sister and I, we brought home our report cards. And back then you had a report card and you had a row of all your grades and you could see immediately, okay, you had all A's or B's or whatever. And, Janet and I, we were pretty obedient kids, and we knew that if we brought home anything less than an A, our mother was not going to be happy. And yeah, she knew how to throw a shoe or whatever to make sure you stayed in line. But, one day we brought our report cards home, and my older brother, he goes, wow, you guys can probably become aerospace engineers or even an astronaut. And my 9-year-old brain said, well, they'll never pick me to be an astronaut, but I can definitely become an aerospace engineer. And so at 9, I had set my sights on becoming an engineer, an aerospace engineer. I didn't even know what it was.
I guess the first version of who I saw, that I could become was my father. My father was a police officer in Pomona, where I grew up. And so I just really was blown away by the way people responded to him, and so I looked up to him, but other people clearly didn't. So I wanted to be a police officer like my father. I also looked up to Marcus Allen. Los Angeles Raiders running back, and I wanted to be like Marcus Allen. So sports were important. My father and his influence were important. And then I saw a shuttle launch on TV and thought I would love to control that thing and drive one of those. And so the interest in tinkering and machines and speed and power and sports, and also just wanting to be a good person like my father, those things all wove together and one way or another led to me being here.
So I was listening to the others talk about what inspired them, and what inspired me was what inspired a lot of American kids back in the 60s. I grew up watching the space program. I learned very early that I liked science and science fiction, so I always like to say that I was an original Star Trek fan, and so that got me exposed to space on television. But in real life, I watched the program develop, the Mercury program, Gemini program, Apollo program. And in 1969, when I turned 13 years old, I watched Neil and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon, and I said, I want to follow in their footsteps.
Dear man from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD.
And as I looked around at NASA, to the point that we're talking about race, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. I didn't see any women. In fact, the first people that they selected to be the creme de la creme, the top astronauts were white guys, all white guys. And so I remember saying to myself, even though I don't see anybody who looks like me, I'm still not going to let that deter me from deciding on what I wanted to do.
Did race ever play a role in the idea of who you could be?
Did race ever play a factor? I would say one major area where race played a factor was in high school. So as I'm kind of starting to develop this plan on how do I become those things, and I knew college was in my path, but I didn't have any, neither of my parents went to college. So, we were having to figure this out together. And the Naval Academy came to my house and said, do you want to play football at Annapolis? And I was like, nope, no thank you. And West Point said the same thing. And I said, nope. And Annapolis actually came back and says, would you like to wrestle? And that was really my main sport. I love football. I wanted to be like Marcus Allen, but I was a better wrestler. And you want to come grapple at Annapolis? And I said, no, thank you. And so I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Boys in the Hood, but the father in that movie is Furious Styles. And the conversation that he has with his son is something very similar to how I felt. It was that there wasn't a place for me in the military. And so I go off to college, and one of my mentors, I'm in his office waiting for him to come in. He's one of the few black faculty members at my university. And he comes into the room, and as he steps in, he is in this full regalia, the black suit with the gold around the wrists and the hat. And I was like, wow, sir, when did you enlist? And he said, I'm actually an officer in the Navy Reserves. Boom. The next version of what I could become. And that, to me, there's so many lessons I pulled from that. But the power of exposure and seeing yourself in something.
Hello, everyone. Victor Glover here, checking in during my 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station.
When we were growing up in the 60s, it was interesting to see some of the greatest feats of humankind on the television, little black and white television, but turn the channel and see some of the greatest challenges that we had in the United States at the time. So watching Martin Luther King at the same time we're going to the moon, it was incredible. Talking to my mom, who was a teacher, who said, would always ask us, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? And kind of pushing us. And I remember going to her and saying, Mom, I know what I want to be. I want to be an astronaut. And she said, that's nice. And started to turn around, but then again, she turned back, she said, but if that's what you want to do, you can be and do anything that you want.
Good time.
As a kid, I became interested in airplanes, and I liked
making model airplanes and reading books on airplanes. And I was fascinated by airplanes. And so that proved to be what I find later on to be my passion.
I don't know if I had a vision of who I wanted to be when I was younger, but I will tell you this. I think I was born to be an engineer. And I think specifically, I was born to be an electrical engineer.
I remember being in, I think it was 7th grade. We had this assignment before we could take off early to go to recess. You had to write down where you saw yourself in, 10, 15, 25 years. And I simply wrote down on my little assignment sheet that I want to be able to look up from where I was working and see the curvature of the Earth from space. And I plunked that down on the desk and headed off to recess.
My mother was my main inspiration. They discovered art when I was in preschool, and she had me in every art class that ever was. And she got me a library card when I was 4. And we had conversations, and she would talk about astronomy and orbital mechanics and space.
I grew up in the segregated South, so I am a son of the South, if you will. Blacks and whites went to separate schools and had separate facilities and everything. But in the mid-50s or so, there were lots of programs on television that talked about life in the military and actually promoted the military. So that's where I saw the Naval Academy. I fell in love with the uniforms more than anything else, and the beauty of what's called the Yard. It's the campus of the U.S. Naval Academy. And it didn't hurt that all the pretty girls from all over the Northeast came there on the weekends looking for husbands.
You sort of assume that astronauts never had hard times. Yes, I've had hard times too.
At some point in everybody's life, they're going to have that moment where they're going to have to step off the ledge. They're going to have to just make that push out into the void. And it's always, always, always going to be a extreme gut check.
But I think the important thing is to keep your goal in mind. And my goal was to succeed and eventually become an astronaut, and to be patient enough in order to hang in there. In other words, don't quit.
Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something, and always have an alternative plan if things in your life kind of go awry.
You never learn a damn thing with your successes. And so the idea of failure is probably the best thing that can happen to people who want lasting success. Because on the next time around, you think your way through a better way, a more creative way to get through to your success. And then it forces you to be creative.
Well, I feel very honored to be the first Black astronaut to fly in space. And in that role, one of the things that I wanted to do is not only be a role model for African Americans on the ground, but also be a leader in helping pull other Black astronauts into space with me.
It is hugely important to see people who look like you and who can inspire you, especially in fields that you want, because it shows you, right there, the people that are there that you can touch, that you can feel, that you can reach out to, that you can talk to, that, if they can do it, then there's a chance for me to do it too.
When I was first thinking about becoming an astronaut, I asked my father, can Black people become astronauts? Remember, this is just a few years after the Civil Rights Act of '64 had been passed, and there was still a lot of segregation. It didn't go away overnight. And he looked at me, he says, not only can you be an astronaut, there have been people, Black people. There was at least one Black pilot who was selected to be an astronaut. But the fact that he had gone out there and had blazed that trail meant to me as a 5-year-old boy that there was no limit. Nobody's going to stand in my way. The only way I was not going to become an astronaut is if I decided not to become an astronaut. And I needed that role model out there to inspire me.
I have a connection to all the African-American astronauts because in some way either we were in the office together and so we share experiences from that, or they came before me and I met them. And it's just a small sorority/fraternity. And we try to support each other, and we get together every once in a while and talk. And so it's a great group to be a part of, and I appreciate each and every one of them.
My takeaway from this experience is don't just assume what you can do, but take that step to see that you can do it, because a lot of times we think, oh, I can't do this, or we take from our experience or what people say or our surroundings, and we're like, well, I can't do this because of what such and such said or where I'm from.
When I was in the gift shop, I was looking at all, the national shirts, and it was this one shirt that said, failure is not an option. And I said, I need that because I need to believe that for myself right now.
And so your friends and family, do they know that you're here today?
My parents actually don't know, but they will know when they get back home. To come and meet astronauts, that was like the most exciting thing ever.
It was really inspiring. Like, I have so many feelings just because, like, one, you'll meet an astronaut every day.
During the conversation, it's kind of crazy because I'm very interested in things like quantum mechanics, theory of relativity. So I know this encourages me to keep going. I'm going to keep watching, keep learning.
They're just like us. Like, I was expecting, my nerves was on me when I first walked in the room. I was like, but from their stories, I could tell they went through the same, some trauma, we all went through the same thing. And that just opened up like a level in my mind where I'm like, okay, time to scribe, time to pick up the slack, time to do what I gotta do.